I wanted to share with you a tip for installing Rivnuts that I think will be helpful to you in the future if you use them. Rivnuts are a rivet nut. That's kind of where the name came from. It allows you to blindly mount, meaning from the front of something that you don't necessarily have to have access to the back of, blindly insert a threaded insert in it that then allows you to thread screws in there. So the way that it works is it goes through the metal like this, like you can see it kind of goes all the way through, and hopefully you can see the texture. There's kind of a little ribbed area there. That expands and flattens out on the other side of the metal. So you drill the right sized hole for it, and that's going to be different for each size Rivnut. You need a Rivnut setting tool like this one here, and you can see the way it works. It just pulls that thread in and out. And these come in different sizes. You can replace the dies on them so that you can use it with multiple different sizes of Rivnuts. It just depends on which size you're going to make use of. So then in order to operate it, you pull it out to its full extended size here, and then you thread the Rivnut on directly. And you can also do that with the little screw on the end of it. It just kind of depends on what's more convenient for what you're working on. And then you place that through the hole you're going to work with, and then you squeeze the handles together. And when you squeeze the handles together, I'm not going to do it to this piece of metal here. When you squeeze the handles together, it pulls that, and you can see that it kind of fattens out that part right there. And of course, if you have a piece of metal in between the flange and that flat part, it now becomes part of that metal. It becomes a permanently installed insert. So, the tip I'd like to share with you is when you install one of these in a round hole and you pinch it down, there's a fair amount of friction on that hole. There's a decent amount, and especially if your hole is kind of jaggedly cut because you had a sloppy drill, didn't drill it with a drill press nice and smooth. So there's a little bit of friction there, but not a ton. And so if you end up getting some galvanic corrosion between your screw and the material that the Rivnut is made out of, your screw may kind of weld itself to the Rivnut, and then when later you go to uninstall it, it'll just spin. It'll just spin in the hole. And that sucks, because then you've got to bust out the drill and drill out the screw and the Rivnut, and you might have a bad day trying to do that. So you get a triangular file. You just get a regular triangular file, and you file kind of a Q in it. So I'm just going to do that here. You file an irregularity in it, and you can file more than one if you want to. You can file a lemon shape, whatever. You file an irregularity into it, and then when you go to squeeze it in there, when you go to install it, and I'm doing this a little awkwardly because I didn't think this through, and then when you install your Rivnut and it squeezes down onto that, it squeezes into that irregularity. And now that it has squeezed into that irregularity there, which is probably not going to be very apparent to the camera, but it's squeezed into it, that means that later, if I want to try and rotate this, I won't be able to rotate it. Well, of course, I would never want that to rotate, so I've got it locked in to the material that it's smashed into. And it's just a little bit of cheap insurance so that later down the road when you want to remove it, which that's kind of the whole reason why you would use a Rivnut instead of a rivet, that lets you remove it later without having it spin.